Buckle up. It's time for the Champions of Cinema podcast.
Welcome, sports fans, to the Ultimate Cinematic Arena. I'm your host, Joe Walker, and this is the Champions of Cinema podcast. Fellow producer James Thunderlips Marshall and I are diving deep into the heart-pounding world of sports films. The victories, the defeats. James, I'm doing the intro read. Shush. The victories, the defeats, and the unforgettable moments that make us cheer, cry, and believe in the power of the underdog. It's season 3, episode 3, and don't call it a comeback. Don't put me up a statue. James, don't die of a heart attack. It's time for Rocky 3.
Love that. Thunderlips. When did that come from?
Well, I just wanted to use Thunderlips somewhere in the intro.
Yeah. Respectable.
Is that acceptable?
Yeah, I'll let you off. Yeah. All right.
Oh, fair enough. Before we get started and I start talking to you about your week, here's 5 reasons why people should watch Rocky 3.
Clubber Lang, played by Mr. T, steals the show with his raw power and legendary trash talk.
Rocky's journey from champ to chump to comeback king hits hard.
Apollo Creed goes from rival to Rocky's ultimate trainer and friend.
Eye of the Tiger fuels one of the most epic montages ever.
Heart-pounding fights and a revenge match. This movie is pure adrenaline from start to finish.
Perfect. That's a good 5 reasons why.
It's great.
If you haven't been to watch it before, go and watch it. I think I was remembering this movie a little bit more fondly than I should have done.
Yeah.
Not to take anything away from it, because I think it's still a star in the constellation that is the Rocky movie series, but I don't know if it's quite as good as I remember.
Which is so interesting, because I was the opposite. I thought this film wasn't that was kind of okay. It was kind of, you needed to watch Rocky 3 before Rocky 4, but I will finish this thinking, wow, this is the best Rocky to film to date, maybe potentially.
Well,
as in fun
go,
compared to 1 and 2 anyway. Just I thought like it had the most boxing in it. Potentially it had
definitely has the most boxing.
Had a lot less filler, but it still had lots of Adrian. It still had lots of Mickey and family stuff. And
still no birthday robot yet though, so I'm not
haven't got
interested.
there yet. So immediately deduct points from that. But I thought, wow, this is, if each Rocky film has to have a purpose, then this film achieves its purpose for sure.
Definitely. Okay, so before we get started to really dissect this movie, what have you been watching, James?
Not a lot. It's been a busy week. I watched a bit of like the Amazon Prime like secret level stuff. There's like animated shorts they've been doing. So
good stuff.
One with Keanu Reeves in it, which was just like, this is weird, but yeah, it's cool. Enjoyed it. But yeah, quiet week for me. More NFL, I suppose. Playoffs and stuff. But what about you?
Quite a lot of stuff. I went to the cinema yesterday. It's becoming almost a Friday cinema activity for me every week. And yesterday I went to see A Complete Unknown with good old Timothy Chalamet in it, playing Bob Dylan. It's quite good. It was enjoyable.
Like a Rolling Stone.
Well, that's actually quite a good impression. I have watched some Skeleton Crew. Yeah. The series with Jude Law in the Disney series. We've been watching some of that. It's quite fun.
I've heard good things about that.
Huge Goonies adventure kids adventure vibes.
I feel like that kind of got bombed by viewers initially, just because like it was maybe too kiddie, but actually like when you think about Star Wars' origins, like it is a kids thing. Yeah, cool. A busy week for you.
But it has been a busy watching week. But we're going to get back on track and talk about something that I really enjoyed watching, although it was different. Rocky 3 is so far my weakest of the 3 Rocky movies. Wow. You're saying it's the strongest of your
of the 3 so far. I think so, just because it felt more refined. I feel like it was like it cleaned up the mistakes of Rocky. Maybe it doesn't have the same magic and heart that the first 2 had, but I do think like as a product, it's a more finished product. If that makes sense, because now
that's exactly how I felt. Yeah. I came out of it thinking that it was more of it was a product. I felt like it was all it was Stallone had worked out, this is now a business and it's a product, and this is a franchise, and we are making films in the franchise. We aren't doing it to make art. We're doing it purely to continue the entertainment factor.
Yeah,
so
it's kind of
without giving too much away.
Kind of mega, because like I feel like this film could have been the point at which Rocky dies as a franchise. If this film was really rubbish, then there probably wouldn't have been a Rocky 4. There might not have been a Creed. Whereas like this film needed to to go somewhere new. It couldn't just be another, underdog boxer, blah blah blah. Like it had to change Rocky as a character quite dramatically. It had to build on what was made in the first two films, and then
absolutely,
yeah. And I think that made the future Rocky films easier to make and stuff. It kind of created it was a stepping stone.
True. Yeah. Well, this is 1982, and it's Rocky 3.
When was the first one made?
1976.
76, and then like 2 was like
so every 3 years. Every 3 years.
Okay.
This one had a budget of 17 million, up from 7 million of Rocky 2, and made an earning of 270 million, which was up 70 million from Rocky 2. And it's got a Rotten Tomatoes rating of 65. It's got an IMDb rating of 6.8, which isn't, so they're some of the lowest ratings of the series that we've watched so far.
Still, though, like not terrible, but especially like some of the films with Sylvester Stallone end up making is still one of his higher ones.
But something I've come to the opinion of is that this is a very different Rocky experience. But I think that's meant to be the case. Sure. I think that's what Stallone was going for. Can you try to sum this movie up in your Japanese poem as a haiku, please?
Hard to eat when full. Only way is down when up. Desire's rose withers.
That's interesting. So all of your haiku there is about descent and the downside of this movie.
I think so, yeah.
Not the but
sure.
And less about the full arc, the full, Christopher Moltisanti character arc.
Sure, but if a rose withers, I'm not a botanist. I don't know. If a rose withers, can you re-water it? Can you revive it?
I don't think so.
No, shit.
I think when flowers.
I've only got 3 lines, and 5 syllables isn't a lot. So I can't do the entire film in 3 lines, but.
I'm surprised I Pity the Fool isn't in there somewhere. But there you go.
I pity the fool.
Yeah.
I'm gonna beat you like a dog, Balboa.
Yeah. We're going to talk a lot about good old Clubber Lang in this episode. I think this one's good fun. It's got plenty going on. It's nice to see a different opponent.
Yeah.
Than Apollo.
Sure.
I think if we'd had Apollo, if we'd had the trilogy as we referred to it last week, it might have been too much.
Yeah.
This one, though, I was sort of thinking to myself as I was watching through it, I was like, does it sort of telegraph what's going to happen quite comfortably? So you get that, you get a really cool montage at the start. Then you get Rocky versus Clubber, but it's in the first half of the movie. Is Rocky going to beat Clubber in that first fight? And then what's going to happen after that? So this one's not going to surprise you anywhere along the way, is it?
No, I guess not. But I suppose what's interesting is that you need to kind of see Rocky's transformation, having no motivation essentially, because he's at the top, he's at the mountaintop. He's done everything he can. He's essentially matched Apollo in terms of legacy and height.
Yeah.
And now he needs to prove himself that he can still be that boxer.
Okay, so we're going to talk about Act 1, Fall from Glory. Rocky Balboa, now a famous and wealthy world heavyweight champion, enjoys his newfound success with 10 title defences and a life of luxury. However, his complacency begins to show. A rising contender, Clubber Lang, emerges with an aggressive, hungry fighting style and challenges Rocky publicly, accusing him of fighting weaker opponents. Rocky's trainer, Mickey, reluctantly reveals that he deliberately arranged easier fights to protect Rocky. Despite Mickey's warnings, Rocky accepts Clubber's challenge. During their fight, Mickey suffers a fatal heart attack Distracted and unprepared, Rocky is swiftly defeated, losing his title and his confidence. Mickey's death leaves Rocky emotionally shattered and questioning his identity. There's plenty of stuff going on. Actually, I think the first third of this movie is the best third.
I agree. I agree, absolutely.
Most stuff going on.
Because the way it transitions from Rocky 2 to Rocky 3, you can see like what's happened in Rocky's life since. You know, they have that great winning montage with Eye of the Tiger,
we start off with the usual Rocky recap.
Yes,
of the previous
the usual
last
Rocky
5 minutes of the movie,
and then it goes straight into Eye of the Tiger and showing him now, you know, collecting wins essentially, win.
Mm-hmm.
He's now a commercial darling. He's doing sponsorships with Nike and cereals. You know, he's now the king of sports, and he probably would have ended up getting like ESPY's Athlete of the Year or whatever. You know, if there's
all of those things.
100%.
It's all the plaudits, isn't it?
Yeah, he's the media darling of the world now. Everyone loves him because of his story. But then parallel,
I thought the spinning, you know, it was a true 80s montage of spinning paper.
Yeah,
boom.
Mm-hmm.
It's got Citizen Kane elements to it.
Yeah, I love that.
It's like Rocky had watched some Citizen Kane or something. And then it had all the things like the shots of him advertising certain perfumes and certain, you know, like his watch or Rolex or whatever it might have been.
Mm-hmm.
There's all those different adverts for him, and I felt like, are these just adverts for Stallone to have done rather than Rocky to have done?
Yeah. But
is life imitating art here, or is art?
I enjoyed the parallels though with Clubber as well, though, to have it, because then you see Clubber. Clubber is essentially what Rocky was in the first film, you know, just from a different background. You know, he's training the really humble methods. You know, he's doing a couple contending shots, but he's starving for an opportunity to take down Rocky, and he thinks that Rocky's just, you know, only taking easy fights. And obviously when Rocky ends up announcing that he thinks it's probably time to step away from the sport, you know, Clubber's like, you're just scared, you know, you kept ducking me, you didn't want to fight me and stuff, and sort of forces Rocky to say, okay, fine, I'll show this guy whatever. And then of course Mickey, you know, being at this point Rocky's a father figure essentially, living with Rocky, like, look, you can't beat this guy. You know, it's that he is everything that you're not currently, or maybe everything that you used to be. You know, you don't have that fire anymore, Rocky. You know, it's like all the media stuff. It's that thing you sent me this week in the lead up to this episode. Is that it's
the Hagler Hearns, the Hagler Marvin Hagler.
It's hard.
Quote,
it's hard to get up in the morning at 5 a.m. when you're sleeping in silk pajamas. And I just thought that's perfect. That's this film. You know, that's why like I put that so much, emphasize that so much into my haiku, because I was just like, that is, you can't fake that, in the sense that, you know, you can't. It's so hard to maintain that hunger as an athlete when the motivation for you to being an athlete in the first place sort of fades away. And that's not just necessarily an athlete thing. I think you get that a lot in artists. I think a lot of musicians, they do their best work at the start of their thing. I always, you know,
that's because their best music's about struggle, isn't it?
Exactly. I was always a big fan of Oasis growing up, and hearing Noel Gallagher in interviews, it was like, when they were first writing their records, you know, just their big stuff, you know, their first 2 albums were by far their biggest work and their most popular pieces. You know, when they wrote Wonderwall, Live Forever, you know, all the main stuff which, you know, dominates radios. You know, they were doing music like their life depended on it. You know, it was like this is their way out. This is like, and everything they're talking about is their struggles. Whereas when you're a millionaire and you drive a Rolls Royce around and you're living comfortable, it fades. You know, that fire goes.
You're unrelatable, and that's why the people like you, right?
Exactly.
People like Rocky at the start because he is just another guy from Philadelphia. They like him in the second movie because they can see themselves in him from a perspective of he wins because he's got more desire than the rich man and the competent champion. And then, but by Rocky 3, that he's completely devoid of everything that made him Philadelphia's prince in the first place, right? So it's kind of hard. I can see why it's happens, and I think this is true for many different athletes and many different levels. You know, the real thing that people say is that the Mount Rushmore kind of guys in any sport are the ones who continuously stay hungry for success.
Your Brady's, your Michael Jordans, you know, these are the guys which were as successful at the start of their career as they were at the end of their career. You know,
weirdly motivated not by success. Sometimes it's motivated by avoiding failure.
Yes,
which is the two
that obsessive personality that those kind of guys
proving
have.
people wrong.
Proving people wrong, finding motivation in. I mean, there were stories of Jordan like almost essentially making up stories that would to motivate himself.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about Mick. It's interesting how Mick. Obviously, this is the last time we see Mick because Mick dies. Although he does make an appearance in Rocky 4, I believe, or Rocky 5 even. You know, Burgess Meredith, amazing actor. You know, one of those guys that's been around for forever. It's interesting how he's changed over the course of the 3 movies, isn't it? His arc as a character is brilliant. And I like how when you have multiple movies, you can do a true arc for a character over time. You can see his fear for Rocky in this movie is, you know, we just didn't want to lose anything. And you can see that Mick's become comfortable with his lifestyle of being the trainer of the world champion for 10 you know, fights or whatever.
I want to point to a very interesting parallel, which has literally occurred to me at this moment. But
go for it.
2011, Dark Knight Rises, Alfred and Bruce Wayne. Think about that film when Batman learns about Bane and had this monster of a character who's faster, stronger, more explosive than him. Alfred is saying, look, you can't take this guy on. He has that hunger which you don't have. Bruce Wayne says / Batman, he's just another bad guy. I can take him. And Alfred says, look, okay, I'm not going to be there to bury another Wayne. Okay, I'm done. He steps away, similar to how Mickey steps away. I can't do this. Rocky is able to bring Mickey back in, say, look, just one more fight. Just one more fight, please. Just one more fight, and then we're done. We'll both walk away from the sport.
I just thought about, you know, Batman has his back broken in that movie.
No.
Thunderlips does the big bold backbreaker across his knee against a Rocky. You know, there's a lot of maybe Dark Knight Rises is just a rip off of that.
Yeah, and maybe we've just discovered another trope. Is sort of like the complacent athlete who think almost going back now into classics. Think about Achilles and how he thought he was.
It's not complacent athlete. It is invincible athlete in their own mind.
So think Achilles and how he thought he was invincible, and it it was ultimately his sort of overconfidence that led to his downfall. You know,
but only the only people that can see that are the people that are devoid from that situation, aren't they? They're the loved one, or the coach, or the mentor.
Military leaders, Napoleon, that man from Austria. You know, they all were blinded by their own. They believed in their own invincibility. Ultimately, even politics.
There's always a Russian front. There's always a Russian front rocking up, isn't there? That's the problem.
Always a Russian on the way.
Yeah.
But there we are.
Quite. You know, not just figuratively, but for Rocky, definitely.
But yeah, I think like that's another thing in history, isn't it? It's like everyone's time comes, but it never comes at the moment which the person expects necessarily.
That's a fair point.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a shame that we have to lose Mickey, but he pushes on the storyline really nicely, and it means that Rocky has it gives Rocky some real problems to deal with and contend with in his own mind, but he also gives him, you know, the need to develop other relationships.
Yes.
Until this point, we've only seen Apollo as the opponent, the antithesis, the person that Rocky's. But then we get a transition of Apollo into being something else. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Diamonds form under pressure, and Rocky had to go through a lot of discomfort and growth in order to be able to cope with being without Mickey. You know, he was very reliant on Mickey. We see him in the fight with Clubber. Like, look, I can't do it. Like, I need Mickey with me, you know. And that was
there is that wonderful moment. We haven't talked about that. We're gonna get that in a minute, aren't we? With oh no, because we have talked about him losing.
Sure.
Sorry. But no, there is that it's really different because he's sitting there in the corner having gone through only the first round, and he's just like, I can't keep up with him. He's too fast. He's too strong. You know, he's the doubt is fully there, and there's no saving him. You know, Paulie even says, I don't know what to say. Just go and beat him. The themes of the Rocky movies we've seen so far, you know, Rocky 1's about, you know, fire and desire and trying to make things happen and love. Rocky 2, Rocky 2 is about knowing one's self and self-worth.
Not underselling yourself, you know,
not underselling
removing
yourself.
self-doubt, and that, like, you are worthy of, you're right to think that you can attain something. Don't think something is above yourself.
And Rocky 3 is massively about self-doubt. Again, it's all about that self-doubt and, you know, fear and losing things. He's so fearful of losing anything because he has lost Mick and he's realised how bad all of the losing can be. A couple of things I wanted to pick up on, just little quick talking points. We won't talk about them at the end. I want to talk about them now. The Tiger montage is incredible. Let's talk about that later, but that's cool. That Thunder Lips fight took 10 days to film.
Fucking hell, wow.
And Hogan's good in it. You know, he does some really fun things. He's, you know, based upon a different kind of wrestling character that he never really was. He didn't really play a heel until the mid-90s. I really wasn't sure about the whole, I've written it down here as Paulie 3 Eye of the Arcade scene, where Paulie's just drunkenly rambling through the world and being unsure about stuff. Didn't know if it needed it. Why do I need?
I feel like
it
it shows the separation that's occurred between Rocky and Paulie. It's like in Rocky 1 and I guess 2, him and Paulie are very similar, the same sort of class background. You know, they're very, yeah. Whereas when Rocky becomes successful, he sort of leaves Paulie behind to an extent, and Paulie feels a bit disgruntled. Like, this guy, he's so much, you know, he's got everything. You know, he's got the girl, he's got the fame, he's got the success. You know, and it's like he feels. I think it's a part of it is jealousy, and part of it is entitlement. Like, well, you know, I'm your friend. You know, why don't you do this and that? You know, it's kind of like it wasn't a great relationship between Rocky. They had to do some healing, but you know, after that point, they seemed okay.
Makes sense. And then the question, a big question I want to ask you is Rocky even Rocky anymore in Rocky 3? At the start, he's wearing a suit and tie. He's got a big coat like jacket.
He always wears a suit and tie. Everything, yeah. Even at home,
he's become grown up and sensible. These are the notes that I've made whilst I was watching the movie. He's grown up and sensible. Like, he goes and picks up Paulie from the drunk tank, and he's like, he's the one. He's like the voice of reason to Paulie about stuff. I'm like, that's crazy.
I think, yeah.
He has increased intelligence. He's smarter. He's actually more, you know, he speaks better. He drives a Maserati and has a mansion. And the final straw for me that he's no longer Rocky is that he does singing in the bad.
This is ultimately his transition to Apollo. Like, he's now becoming Apollo. He's
worse than Apollo.
They both wore suits all the time. You know, I think he's mirroring Apollo. I think he thinks that this is what a world champion has to do now. They have to be in a mansion. They have to be the public figure.
Is he wearing the Apollo mask? Is he trying to wear the mask of a champion?
Yeah.
That he thinks Apollo was wearing previously. So,
and then when you think about Rocky 4, Rocky's biggest, just as like a flavor, just a touch, you know, his biggest fear is that he ends up being, even has the same ending as Apollo. Clubber Lang.
Yes, let's talk about Clubber. So you mentioned earlier that Clubber has almost exactly what Rocky's going through when it comes to sort of his transition or his action. The one thing that I will say is different is Clubber has got opportunities, and Clubber has been getting fights and moving up. He's not been fighting
perhaps
in
that's a trend
basements.
Perhaps that's a trend that Rocky started. Maybe it's like now they're getting like lower level guys.
Fighter.
They're giving them chances now because they're realizing from a commercial point of view as well, it's quite successful.
It's better to sell.
Right?
What I love about Clubber is he's almost unrelated. He's a proper villain because you can't like him. He's almost unlikable.
He's not as developed as Rocky or Apollo as a character.
No.
Yeah.
No, exactly. And he's even goading Rocky in front of Adrian
Mhm.
and even saying things about Adrian, which Apollo never really does. Apollo doesn't disrespect Adrian in the same way.
Mm.
You know, it does a little bit, but he mostly disrespects Rocky. But this is like a step further, isn't it? This is a step deeper into that whole.
His purpose
you know-
is purely to be an antagonist, but also to show like the contrast to Rocky. You know, he's showing what Rocky used to be. He has all his strengths are things that Rocky doesn't have anymore as Rocky's becoming complacent.
Did you notice in the training montage how all of the things that Clubber was doing was almost exactly a shot for shot, exact shot of what Rocky had been doing when he was doing his fight training?
Like pull-ups,
so like the sit-ups and punches.
Exactly.
You know, but it was almost exactly the same. And I was like, oh, that's just... It's almost like what they did was they said, right, what were the shots of Rocky that we really liked in his montage in 2? We're going to make Clubber do those shots now.
If there was a film called Clubber that that just sort of, you know, joined Rocky's, both of their paths sort of converged in that joint montage. You know, they sort of.
I'd love a Clubber film. I'd love it.
Sure.
That'd be really interesting to me. I'd find that quite cool. Okay, talk to me about Act 2.
Sure. Act 2. Redemption and transformation. Devastated, Rocky struggles to find motivation. Apollo Creed, his former rival, steps in to help and offers to train Rocky, bringing him to a gritty gym in Los Angeles to regain his eye of the tiger, the fierce determination he once had as an underdog. The training is grueling, with Apollo pushing Rocky to develop speed, agility, and mental focus, traits that he had lacked in his first fight against Clubber. Meanwhile, Rocky's wife Adrian confronts him about his fear of failure, urging him to confront his insecurities and fight for his own belief in himself. This heartfelt conversation reignites Rocky's determination as he looks ahead to his rematch against Clubber.
I always thought that this middle training montage was the Eye of the Tiger montage. Do you know that's my Mandela effect of this movie upon myself. It's such different training because it's not Mickey led, it's not cold, it's not horrible, it's in California. You know, Rocky's swimming. It's almost as if like Stallone was like, I love to swim between Rocky 2 and Rocky 3. I want to do some swimming. You know, and it's like, and I want to do some dancing, and singing. It's quite strange how different the approach to training is. I think that this section of the film gives us maybe even the greatest Rocky line of all of the 9 films that we're going to cover, with that scene where Apollo's like, he's hooking.
Damn it, Rock!
Come on, God damn it,
Rock! What's the matter with you?
He's like, tomorrow, and he's like, there is no tomorrow.
Yeah, it was probably
there is no tomorrow, and then it's that slamming of the hands.
Yeah, when Carl Weathers passed away early in 2024, and there were lots of edits sort of outlining his legacy and his biggest movie moments, which he has several. That was the clip that came up the most. I feel like that line is probably his most famous line. If you think, okay, give me an Apollo line from all the Rocky films, that's probably the one people remember most, even though perhaps Rocky 3 is his least significant role.
Well,
arguably.
Interestingly, Carl Weathers says that this was his favourite Rocky movie.
I bet, yeah.
Because he had true character development.
Yeah.
He did lots of different things. And,
yeah.
You know, he steps into that role. I think it's interesting how it's Apollo training him, but Duke is still around, still hanging around in the periphery. So Duke is ready to help Rocky with the training too. I don't know if Apollo's training is really that special, or if he just helps Rocky find himself again.
I think that's
I
think it's like, well, without Mickey, he needs someone to sort of get him back down to basics, right? It's kind of like you need to rebuild again. So you can't really do it at Mickey's gym. Too many memories. It's all too soon. Whereas, doing it in a new setting, with a new fresh perspective, is probably quite helpful. The dancing, the first time I watched this film, I thought this is a bit silly, but it kind of makes sense. It's like, he needs to move around more in the ring. A matador in a bull ring. Rather than let Clubber get into his head, he needs to get into Clubber's head. Apollo's character was really enjoyable. Transition from rival to mentor. How he's in the first film, he's confident, he's charismatic, he's always prideful. However, he's a lot humbler in Rocky 3. He admits to Rocky, look, when you beat me, that broke me. That was my end. So much of what Apollo's purpose in this film is like, look, don't repeat my mistakes.
Mm.
You know, don't make the same errors I made.
Yeah, this feels like every conversation we've ever had in our personal lives. Don't make the same mistakes as I made, James.
Damn.
That's all right.
Yeah,
You'll make your own. There'll be different ones, and you'll make your own.
Yeah.
Apollo sees his legacy as being connected to the legacy of Rocky. If he barely beat Rocky, then he barely lost to Rocky, and then Rocky's beaten 10 nobodies, but he gets absolutely destroyed by the first real boxer. Then maybe they're both frauds.
Their fates are intertwined, essentially.
Yes,
yeah. Wow.
And that's why he's so willing to help himself.
He has a selfish reason to want to help Rocky, but that's kind of more realistic. If it was just purely like, I want to help you for the sake of helping you, it's like, well, there has to be some sort of vested interest, you know.
Let's talk quickly about Adrian then.
Yeah. First
and foremost, those 10 fights were very kind to Rocky. He's got a very nice house and a lovely situation. Mm-hmm. They're no longer sleeping in a single bed with Cuff and Link hanging out with them. They've now got this huge home. And I made a small note here about
casually driving around golf buggies around the house, around the complex.
Why has he got an electric garden car? As I've put it, that he's driving around with his kid when he talks to his kid. How far does that car go? Does it just go up and down the same little bit of garden?
Yeah.
What was Rocky thinking when he bought it?
Again, this is just someone who hasn't had money before getting money, thinking, well, this looks kind of fun.
Adrian, I like electric garden cars. You like electric garden cars?
I get one. Maybe you can maybe Polly wants one too. Yeah.
She's
still Adrian though.
Man, Adrian. No, she's not just Adrian though. She's grown into this. You can see it in her that she's enjoying this. Not working in a pet shop life.
That's true, yeah.
And she's with her fur coats, and there's that real moment on the beach where she's sort of like, fucking tell me why you can't do this. Tell me why we're doing this. Explain it to me. If we've got all this money, if we've got all these things, but we can't be honest with each other, then it's not worth fuck all. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really powerful because it makes Rocky have to say that he's scared. And it's so hard for a man sometimes to admit that to themselves. Never mind admitting it to your woman, to your wife.
To the person that you want to always appear strong in front of, to show vulnerability, even if you've been with them for a while, is difficult. And that you have.
Yeah.
And sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's the thing also that Adrian. What I really like about the lesson to learn from this movie is that if you've got an Adrian, if you have a Rock who's your woman, you should be able to talk to her about anything and tell her your greatest fears and your greatest demons.
Mm-hmm.
That's really important.
Because when you do, that's when you get the kind of growth and healing that Rocky has. And that conversation he has on the beach is the turning point. Apollo's just about done. Like, look, he's done. I can't do it anymore. But then Adrian always has that way of tapping into Rocky that no one else can. You can relate to it as like this isn't just a struggle which perhaps athletes have, but it can be anyone who's committed to anything for a considerable amount of time or energy. They need that support to help them from a kind of an emotional point of view, not just a kind of like, you need the carrot and the stick sometimes. So.
And it's very much a commentary on how relationships develop over time. I love how that's what I think Stallone is really ultimately commenting on in all of the Rocky movies, every single one of these nine films that he's in anyway. He's always commenting upon the next stage of life for a man and a couple and a wife and and a husband and all those kinds of things. I think that's massive. We are living a full spectrum of life here with Rocky throughout all of these movies, and that's the legacy of this.
Nice.
Ultimately. Okay. Right. Let's talk about Act 3.
Act 3.
And obviously the comeback, really. Triumph and Legacy. In the climactic rematch against Clubber Lang, Rocky enters the ring as a transformed fighter. Utilising Apollo's training techniques, he fights with a mix of strategy, speed, and relentless focus, outmaneuvering Clubber's raw power. In a dramatic and grueling battle, Rocky ultimately triumphs, reclaiming his championship title and sense of self-worth. The victory marks not only a physical, but also an emotional triumph, as Rocky proves to himself and the world that he is still a true champion. The film ends with a private sparring match between Rocky and Apollo, symbolising their friendship and mutual respect, whilst leaving the result about their bout a mystery. This is my favourite ending to any of the Rocky films.
Ding, ding.
It's on my best lines here.
Yeah.
You know, just keep punching, Apollo. You want to ring the bell? It's like, all right, ding, ding. The final fight is quite interesting. It's the only Rocky fight up until this point where we don't get a skipping of rounds in the fight. There's no round 1, then it's round 2, then it's round 3. Then it just shows you the whole fight. Yeah, shows you the whole fight.
Yeah.
And I think also this is one of the only Rocky films, well, it's the only one up until this point where Rocky's actually got some defense. He's actually putting his hands up and covering up.
Yeah. He looks a lot better
and letting
in the ring.
Clubber. Yeah. It's like he's watched the first 2. It's like Stallone's watched the first 2 films and gone, do you know, he gets punched in the face a hell of a lot. He's not going to be able to survive for a long time if he does that. You know, we need to teach him how to cover up a little bit.
And actually, it's Clubber who's got some of Rocky's kind of old tendencies of just taking punches constantly because he's still a very raw fighter. Yeah. No, it's good. I mean, I did think, like, from a fighting style point of view, like, he changed dramatically. He was so much faster. You know, his attacks and it was like, you know, it was great to see, like, how much different he was as a fighter.
How much reality do you think there is to that from a boxing sense? Do you think that's real, that a boxer can change
No, I don't think. No, boxers don't change that
style
much.
that much.
They can't change that much.
Let's just quickly talk about Rocky and how he sort of transitions from being complacent to being sort of rejuvenated in the end of this movie. Talk to me. So, talk to me about the start through to the end. What do you think is important?
Well, at the start of the film, you know, Rocky's enjoying the fruits of his labours. He's living a life of luxury, the fame, the adoration. He's got all the sponsorship deals. You know, he's basically, he can't get much higher at this point. You know, he's got the keys to the city now. They've made a statue. But as far as I'm concerned, if you've got a statue made for you and you're still playing, a lot of statues are made after a guy's finished playing, or even if they've passed away. But he's got a statue and he's still competing. How much more is there really left for you to achieve? You know, so he's become more of a celebrity really than a fighter. He's indulging himself now in more commercials and charity exhibitions. You know, like the one he has against Thunderlips. But with Clubber Lang's public taunts, Mickey's admission about him protecting him from dangerous opponents, you know, that shatters Rocky's confidence because it's kind of like this whole time everything was a lie, you know. And his defeat at the hands of Clubber and Mickey's death, it deepens this existential crisis of his. You know, it's he feels like he's no longer a true champion, and he has this self-doubt of like, you know, I want to prove everyone I'm right, but that I am still, you know, a champion, but I don't have that desire anymore, and I'm alone, I'm isolated. You know, Apollo steps in as Rocky's mentor, pushes him to rediscover his passion, teach him new techniques, you know, new strategies, helps him evolve as a fighter. And obviously Adrian's emotional confrontation serves as a pivotal moment because she challenges Rocky to face his fears and not just fight for the sake of a title, but to fight for himself. You know, this all leads to Rocky rekindling his, quote, eye of the tiger, you know, balancing skill, determination, humility to have that new energized level of focus, you know. So it's I think to have all of that go on in one film, was really good, which is why that's the main reason why I thought Rocky 3 was better than I perhaps had previously realized. You know, there's that loss of hunger, facing fear, redefining greatness, and, you know, with help of mentorship, you know, redefining his legacy and reclaiming his legacy. You know, so at this, so now he knows that, no, I really am a champion. It wasn't all staged fights. It wasn't all fake. He transitions from being like that lone fighter to someone shaped by, you know, he's able to use the others around him to keep having that motivation, and that he's not necessarily playing for titles, but he's fighting because he wants to fight.
A very astute observation of his experience. That's good. I think it's strange how we've both come to different odds of this. Pre-recording this episode, I was saying that this is the best Rocky film.
Sure.
And you were saying, no, we're still waiting for Rocky 4.
Yeah.
And now I'm saying I don't think this was as good as I remember it being. And you're saying it's better than you've ever remembered it being.
Well, let's talk then maybe about our rankings. So we said that Rocky 1 was a champion. I still think it's a champion. I think that's changed.
Yes.
I think Rocky 2, whilst it built on all the good stuff Rocky 1 had, I did think it was a contender because it just sort of felt like it rode off the back of Rocky 1. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
What do you rank Rocky 3? And
I think for me, Rocky 3 is still, it's in contender ranks because it's got great cast. It's got a great story. Although it didn't ever feel like it was going to, the story never felt like it was going to surprise me. It never felt like I was going to be, and maybe that's just a personal thing that I like, is I want there to be twists and turns in a movie where you're just not sure what's going to happen. It's almost like in Rocky 1, you had a desire to see him go the distance because that's what he was trying to achieve. Rocky 2, there was a desire to see him win, and when you get the double down, you're not sure if he's even going to make it. You're like, get up, Rocky 3, there's never a moment for me where I'm just like, oh, that really captured me emotionally.
I almost feel,
apart from the out of the boxing ring.
It almost just feels like the whole film is really more just to sort of nod towards the athlete's journey of that stage in an athlete's life. Kind of like they've made the mountaintop. What's there left? Because like you said, it's everything's predictable. You know exactly. Like Clubber Lang's character is not complicated, right?
No,
he's not deep at all.
No.
He's just representing the hungry fighter, essentially.
Talk to me about tropes and what great, because we've already said that Rocky is the king of tropes.
Yeah.
What tropes are you getting in this? Do you think?
We've got more montages, of course, and we've got a key like soundtrack in this one. Is Eye of the Tiger because I think for me, when I think back to maybe it's because I was I played guitar and I was into rock music when I was young, still am. But for me, Eye of the Tiger was the first Rocky song I was aware of. Potentially,
it's a non-Bill Conti song, isn't it?
It's a rock song.
It's a rock song that's in there. Interestingly, I think that it worked so well in this that it really affected the soundtrack of Rocky 4 and how that came out. No Easy Way Out, and there's
Burning Heart.
Burning Heart, and Hearts on Fire as well, which is the other song. But there's a real transition away from it being very traditional music to this being more modern rock music, MTV style, I guess.
We're in the 80s now, right? And so everything is that's kind of just where we are at.
Yeah, I came away feeling different about it. So for me, it's a contender, but it's not as high a contender as Rocky 2, just because of how it made me feel. And I want movies to make me feel.
Yeah.
It might even be slip into Journeyman.
It could be a Journeyman just because of whilst I like it, it satisfies me to listen because it's it has so little filler. It's so clearly the path and the storyboard is so clearly defined.
Yes.
That it's it's satisfying to watch, but then if it doesn't surprise you or have sort of those iconic moments, it doesn't necessarily separate itself from the other Rocky films.
That again, now I think if we talk about this and the perspective of whether this is popcorn fun or if it's art house beauty, this is popcorn because again it's directed by Sylvester Stallone. It's not got the same impetus as it doesn't have that kind of I love one of the favorite parts I had about the first two Rocky films were those shots of Philadelphia. There's kind of there's more heart in that, whereas this is very much more glamorous. It's commercialized. The whole film is, ironically, it's the film shows Rocky's become commercialized, but the film itself is commercialized as well. It's it's art imitating life.
Yep.
Can you hit me with some of your best lines from this, if you have any?
There is no tomorrow. Yeah,
that's the one.
Yeah, that's the one.
That is the absolute.
The Carl Weathers. Yeah, it has to be that one.
If they'd given there to be more peril surrounding the clubber fight if it had maybe make it more powerful.
The final
sense?
fight didn't have a lot of gravitas.
It
felt
was just
kind of rushed almost.
Proven.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing is that it's almost saying like Rocky's already made his millions or whatever he's made. He's made all his money. He's got his mansion. He's got everything. It's not like he's going to lose it.
No.
At any point in this movie, if he wins the clubber fight, he wins. Great. He's proven his legacy. If he doesn't win the clubber fight, he's then just a retired bum. You know, he's not he's just a retired millionaire.
Yeah.
Not even a retired bum anymore.
Yeah.
He's got everything that he needs. That's where this movie drops out for me a little bit. Is he loses out? What are the stakes of this? There aren't any really. To me, I've always and will always love ding ding
nice.
At the end of the movie.
Yeah.
I think that Clubber has some good lines, but nobody has. There is no lines in this that are just completely destroying Rocky 2. Memorabilia wise, there isn't really that much either.
No,
there really isn't that much. You know, the fun Thunderlip stuff, but there isn't anything where I'm like, oh yeah, I really want that for Rocky 3, which is a challenge.
Enjoy the statue.
Personally.
The statue's good. Is the statue still there in Philadelphia? They've moved it, right?
So it was on top of the stairs, then it moved down to the bottom of the stairs, off to the left. Mm-hmm. So that because people do visit it, they want to go and see it. They want to go to Philadelphia.
If I ever do a tour of the East Coast, like I have to see that statue. This is a fact. It's but
the thing is that the Philadelphia Museum, that's outside of, I believe, they didn't want it at the top of the stairs. They're just like, it's not art. It's a movie prop, and that's what they say.
Is a shame, really.
Wanted it moving.
They don't see it.
But I think at times it has moved to the top of the stairs again.
Because I think the people of Philadelphia have really taken on Rocky as a symbol of like what they really tap into that underdog mentality. They feel like they're always the small guy in the fight.
Yes, they are, absolutely. Well, just you wait, James, until we watch a soccer movie called The Damned United, and you get to learn all about the first hero of Derby and it being Brian Clough.
Okay. Oh, I know that name.
It's going to be different experience. Okay, I don't have any memorabilia for this one. I don't have any more talking points for it. I don't think I've got any more about lines. It's almost wrapped this one up.
I think we're done. Yeah.
I know it sounds really strange, and it
maybe that also talks about how maybe shallow this film is. Like, there isn't like a lot going on.
So that is exactly the word I would use for it. Is shallow.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like it's entertaining to watch because it's very clearly structured, but it's kind of it's not very deep in areas besides Rocky's sort of personal struggles with that we've already mentioned. That's like the whole thing of the film is just that really the best thing. You could summarize the film in that
interactions.
You can summarize the film essentially by watching that beach scene. That's the whole film, really.
And if not that beach scene, a couple of scenes in LA. Rocky talking to Apollo saying there is no tomorrow, and then Adrian saying, "What else are we doing this for? Why are we doing it?" It's a really good point. What's really a shame about that, I think, is it sort of means that Burgess Meredith as Mickey throughout the movie, it sort of pushes his performance to the background.
It does,
and sort of makes you think, well, what was it? It doesn't give you the same feel. Well, yeah, okay, let's bring this one to a close then. Let's wrap this one up. I'm still enjoying this. Yeah, and it's just every time I watch another Rocky film, I just want to watch the next one, and I'm ready for the next one. I'm really ready for Rocky 4. I'm excited for Rocky 4. So next week, Rocky 4. The whole let's make a boxing match about the Cold War. Let's make a boxing match about being clean versus using steroids, and let's lie about which one of those athletes is on steroids, because that's what they're going to do next week. But yeah, hopefully you're enjoying this. If you do like it, if you've got any opinions about any of the stuff that we said, leave a comment. Tell us what you think. Tell us where we're wrong. Tell us where we're right. James, where can people get in touch with us if they want to get in touch with us?
They can find us on social media at Champions of Cinema, or they can write to us at championsofcinema@gmail.com.
Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. Really do appreciate you coming along on our journey with us. And hopefully 2025 is being kind to you. Just remember that not every day of your life needs to be like a Rocky day in your life. You know, sometimes it's good to just be kind to yourself and watch a movie. Go out there, watch the Rocky movies, enjoy yourself, and we'll see you next week on the next episode of Champions of Cinema. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.